Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Steve. This is the Fandom Show, and we are back here on Monday Suck after a 2-week break. I did enjoy my break, and I promised that when I returned, I would be doing a special XXL episode of this series. Well, here we are, and we're talking about the entire first season of Star Trek: The Next Generation. Ooh, boy. So I'm not going to do a full episode-by-episode breakdown because there's 26 episodes and that would take a lot of time. So first what I'm going to do is talk about the season in general terms, and then after that, I'm going to look at some specific episodes. So Star Trek: The Next Generation Season 1, 1987, is considered a real mixed bag. Most people don't believe that The Next Generation really hit its stride until the third season and forward, and the first two are generally considered really not that great. Now, there is some very good stuff in Season 2, but Season 1, for the most part, is generally considered hit or miss. The series premiere encountered Farpoint do very good ratings and a lot of praise. It's generally considered to be a fairly good episode, all things considered, but there are other episodes in the series that were not as well received. So why was that so? Well, a few different things were going on. Number one, there wasn't a lot of science fiction on TV in the 1980s. It had been 20 years since there'd been a Star Trek television show, and so the writers and the cast, they had to kind of find their show and figure out how they could gain traction with it, and didn't really have a lot of reference material to rely upon, so they sort of had to figure it out as they went along. Another problem is that this time Gene Roddenberry was still very much in control of the franchise, and he had very, very strict rules as to what could and couldn't happen on the show. One of the more amazing ones is that Roddenberry felt that by the 24th century, which is when this show was set, that human beings would be so evolved that we wouldn't even argue with each other anymore. So try to write an interesting script for a TV show where the characters can't even argue with each other. Not gonna work. The writers tried to find some workarounds, but it didn't really work. And the other problem with Roddenberry is that he insisted bringing on certain creative personnel that he was very tight with, and the other writers and producers that were on the show, we started getting some of this. And if you get a chance to look at an article or a documentary about the behind-the-scenes stuff that was going on the show during this time, it's really fascinating, and I highly encourage you to do that, especially if you are a fan of Star Trek. But needless to say, Star Trek: The Next Generation, the first season, was a whole lot of hit and miss. Why exactly? Well, like I said, there's a bunch of different things going on in front of and behind the camera. In front of the camera, the cast was still trying to figure out how this was going to go. Counselor Troy, Marina Sirtis, was figuring out her role. You had, Geordi LaForge was the chief engineer. He was the guy at the helm, and you had Worf wearing red instead of yellow, and we're trying to figure out who Wesley Crusher is, and just all this kind of constant tweaking and little changes throughout the season, trying to figure out who these characters are and how these puzzle pieces fit together. So it's just kind of all over the place. Now, a lot of series are like this at the beginning, but The Next Generation is particularly notorious for how bad its first season was. Not that the whole season sucked, but there were a lot of unfortunate things about it. So that said, let's go ahead and dig into some specific episodes and get a better idea of what we're dealing with.
Lieutenant Yar of Security, sir. Captain Picard will see you on the battle bridge.
With the saucer gone, can I assume that something interesting happened on the way here?
Battle bridge. That's for the captain to explain, sir.
So I'm going to start by talking about the bad episodes first, and then after that I'll talk about some of the more positive things from the season, and then we'll wrap it all up in the end. So as far as bad episodes go, whoo boy, this season had a lot of them. So to start, we have The Naked Now. This was the second episode of the series right after the premiere, and it was a remake of the original series episode, The Naked Time. In this episode, a virus is unleashed aboard the Enterprise that causes everyone to give in to their innermost desires. And yes, it's as cheesy as it sounds. This episode really ticked off a lot of people when it first came out because it got them worried that maybe The Next Generation was just going to be lame rehashes of original series plots instead of actually finding its own identity, and this episode is just generally considered not very good at all. We have racism. Enterprise ends up visiting a planet inhabited entirely by primitive black people. There's a fight to the death involved. It's generally considered one of the most racist episodes of Star Trek and one of the worst episodes of Star Trek. In a recent poll, it was actually voted the number 2 worst episode in the entire franchise, behind only These Are the Voyages, which is the series finale of Star Trek Enterprise. Might hit that one in a future episode of Monday Suck, because it's its own thing entirely, and there's a lot of good story there. But sticking with TNG Season 1. We have sexism. The Enterprise visits a planet inhabited entirely by women who forcefully try to steal DNA from Enterprise crew members to continue to populate their society. Don't think you'd be able to get away with that one in 2021 either, but hey, what do I know? Moving on, it was the late 1980s, so we had to have an episode about drug use. Yes, even in a series set in the 24th century, we have an episode where a couple of druggies come aboard the Enterprise and get medicine to heal a disease that's breaking out on their planet, which Dr. Crusher quickly identifies the medicine that is as narcotics and figures out, hey, these guys are druggies and we need to put a stop to this. It's very cheesy, it's very preachy, it's just not very good looking back on it, and I would not recommend it in any way, shape, or form. And then finally we have the episode which features the Edo, who live on a very idyllic planet, don't wear a whole lot of clothes, but their planet is very green, it's very bright, it's very well maintained. And then Wesley Crusher steps on the grass and they try to kill him. Picard violates the Prime Directive to save him. That's basically it in a nutshell. It's just Google Star Trek: The Next Generation Edo costumes, and you'll see how ridiculous these outfits were. Like, they were like 1970s B movie bad. I can't even. Every time I watch this episode, the only reason I do is I'll mute the sound and just put my own commentary on it to mercilessly make fun of it. But beyond that, there's no redeeming value in it whatsoever. There were other crappy episodes in this season too. Those are the highlights / lowlights, however you want to parse that. But not really that great. Now, on the flip side of that, we did get a few good things in Season 1. Season 1 featured the debut of Data's android brother, Lore, who would go on to have guest spots in a number of different episodes throughout the series, played excellently by Brent Spiner. Season 1 also featured an episode where Brent Spiner was portraying Sherlock Holmes, which was a lot of fun. They did a callback to that in a later season episode after they straightened out some rights issues with the Sherlock Holmes character, but that was certainly an interesting take for Star Trek in a way to educate the fans about this new thing that the Next Generation had called the holodeck. So plenty of positives there. If you've never seen Brent Spiner playing Sherlock Holmes, you do need to check that out. It is quite entertaining. Of course, the first season, very first episode, saw the debut of Q, one of the all-time great villains in Star Trek history. Is actually going to be coming back in Star Trek Picard Season 2. I'm very excited about that, but Q was far and away one of the best things about Season 1 and about TNG, period. And another bright spot of Season 1 was actually the finale. It's called The Neutral Zone. It features the return of the Romulans to Star Trek, and it also features a tease for the Borg. If you can believe it, the Borg, who would go on to become the greatest villains in the Next Generation, were originally supposed to debut in the finale of Season 1. It didn't happen for a variety of reasons. The Borg ended up debuting late in Season 2, but in Season 1, the whole reason that the Romulans get involved is because there have been some outposts that have disappeared, completely been wiped away from planets on both the Federation and Romulan side of the Neutral Zone. So the Federation, Romulans, they meet up and they're like, what happened to our stuff? Well, it was actually the Borg, and we found that out later. So a very good finale for Season 1, even if the rest, it was really... Now, the good news for the Next Generation is because the show was syndicated, there was no network to cancel the first season. Instead, the reason that it worked is because networks paid to broadcast the show, and they didn't have to worry about an individual network lording over them. Another reason that it worked is because of the Trekkies themselves. There was a ton of fan support for this show. It was the first Star Trek television show in 20 years. There was a lot of hype at the time, and even though the first season was a big mixed bag, there was a strong enough fan base to kind of push the season through and keep the series alive. A good thing that we did that, because it got a lot better from there. Another high point of Season 1 is Patrick Stewart. He was a little hammy at times, but for the most part his acting was very good, which you would expect because, you know, he's a Shakespearean actor and very well trained, and he only got better as the show went on. So, Star Trek: The Next Generation Season 1. Not the worst TV you've ever seen, not the best. If you're going to watch it, remember two things. Number one, it was made in the mid-'80s. Societal attitudes are just a little bit different back then than they are today. And number two, this was the first major science fiction show and Star Trek show in quite a while, so they were going through a lot of stuff just trying to figure things out. It really pales in comparison to a lot of what's on TV today, but if you've got a thing for retro science fiction or just a soft spot for Star Trek, you really can't go wrong by firing it up and binging a few episodes here and there, because a lot of them surprisingly aren't as bad as they say. That is it for our XXL episode of Monday Suck. I do thank you guys so much for watching, and I will be back with more stuff real soon.
Ready for departure, sir. Some problem, Riker?
Just hoping this isn't the usual way our missions will go, sir.
Oh, no, number one. I'm sure most will be much more interesting. Let's see what's out there. Engage.